Before we begin, take a second. If you enjoy sci-fi stories where humanity punches far above its weight, tap like, drop a comment with what you think will happen next, and subscribe so you don't miss the rest of this journey. Now let's begin. Elias Ward had learned long ago that panic was a luxury reserved for people with options. As he crouched behind a slab of shattered basalt, listening to alien boots grind slowly closer through the undergrowth, he allowed himself a single controlled breath and nothing more. The planet beneath him pulsed faintly, not like an earthquake but like a sleeping animal shifting its weight, and the motion traveled straight through his bones. Whatever world this was, it was very much alive, and it did not care that a lone human had been dropped into its throat. His suit's internal display flickered, struggling to maintain a lock on the mercenaries fanning out through the jungle. 5 heat signatures. No hesitation in their movement. Professionals. The kind that didn't shout threats or make dramatic entrances. The kind that assumed the job was already finished. Elias adjusted the pressure bandage around his ribs, ignoring the dull ache that flared in response. He had survived worse injuries in worse places, but this time there was a difference. This time he was alone. The extraction ship should have been back an hour ago. Instead, the sky above the canopy remained empty, broken only by drifting spores that glowed faintly blue as they floated past his visor. The comm channel was dead, jammed or destroyed. He already knew which. Whoever had hired the mercenaries hadn't wanted witnesses, and they certainly hadn't wanted a human making it off-world. A sharp trill cut through the foliage. Not a bird. Not a warning. A signal. Elias felt the corners of his mouth tighten. They were hurting him. He checked his remaining equipment with mechanical efficiency. 1 sidearm low charge. 2 improvised shock traps already deployed behind him. A knife that had been sharpened so many times it no longer resembled its original design. No heavy weapons. No backup. Just muscle memory and stubbornness refined by a species that had learned how to survive by refusing to quit. The mercenaries emerged into view at last. Tall, angular figures wrapped in segmented armor that shimmered to match the jungle's shifting colors. Their leader carried himself with relaxed confidence, his weapon lowered just enough to suggest contempt. When his visor turned toward Elias's hiding place, it lingered there for half a second longer than necessary. "We have you, human," the alien said, his translator smoothing his guttural tones into something almost conversational. "You ran well. That will be noted." Elias didn't answer. Words were for people who thought they could negotiate their way out of extinction. He waited until the nearest mercenary stepped into range, then triggered the first trap. The jungle screamed. Energy arced upward, detonating in a burst of light that sent alien bodies sprawling. One mercenary collapsed, armor smoking, while another staggered back with a sound that might have been pain or surprise. Elias was already moving, sprinting deeper into the trees as return fire shredded the space he'd occupied a heartbeat earlier. Bolts scorched trunks and melted leaves into hissing vapor. The jungle responded with an almost offended rustle, branches shifting as if to watch the chase unfold. Elias vaulted over roots the size of ground vehicles, his boots slipping briefly on bioluminescent moss that pulsed brighter at his touch. A warning flashed across his HUD, then vanished. The planet's electromagnetic field was interfering with his systems. Whatever dominated this world did not appreciate foreign technology. Good, Elias thought grimly. Neither did he. The terrain grew steeper, more hostile. The ground dipped sharply into a ravine where the light dimmed and the air grew heavy, thick with the scent of minerals and something older. Even the insects seemed to fall silent. Behind him, the mercenaries slowed, their formation tightening. Elias knew this place. Not from maps but from the way the mercenaries hesitated. From the way their confidence sharpened into something brittle. This was the line they didn't want to cross. He slid down into the ravine and pressed himself against the stone wall, heart pounding now despite his discipline. The ground vibrated again, stronger this time, and a low sound rolled through the depths, felt more than heard. It was not a roar. It was a presence announcing itself. The mercenary leader appeared at the ravine's edge, weapon raised but finger not yet tightening on the trigger. His visor scanned the shadows below, then flicked to his team. "Do not pursue further," he said, and for the first time there was tension in his voice. "Contain from range." Elias closed his eyes for half a second and smiled despite himself. They knew. Whatever lived here had earned its reputation the hard way. A stone shifted near his foot. Elias froze. Something massive moved in the darkness beyond his vision, its outline briefly revealed by the faint glow of the spores drifting down from above. Yellow eyes opened, low to the ground and impossibly far apart, studying him with a focus that stripped away every illusion he'd ever had about being the apex species. Elias slowly raised his empty hands, careful not to make any sudden movement. He didn't know why he did it. Instinct maybe. Or the ancient human understanding that sometimes survival wasn't about dominance or fear, but recognition. Above, the mercenaries leveled their weapons, unaware that the hunt they had started was no longer theirs to control. And somewhere deep in the ravine, the planet's apex predator decided whether the human in its territory was prey, or something else entirely. Elias's muscles burned as he forced himself to move deeper into the alien jungle, each step a negotiation with the uneven, shifting terrain. The mercenaries above had not yet pursued, but he could hear their comms chatter faintly through the interference. They were reorganizing, coordinating, calculating how to draw him out. Their patience was as methodical as it was lethal, and Elias knew that every second of hesitation worked in his favor, or at least delayed the inevitable. The ravine twisted into a narrow corridor, walls slick with iridescent moss that reflected the faint light in ghostly patterns. He crouched low, feeling the pulse of the world through the soles of his boots, a subtle vibration that hinted at creatures moving far beneath the surface. The jungle was alive in ways humans had yet to categorize. Every rustle, every subtle shift in the air demanded attention. A misstep here could be fatal. He paused at a fork in the ravine. One path climbed toward a plateau bathed in dim bioluminescent glow, the other plunged into a shadowed hollow where the earth smelled of damp iron and decay. Elias calculated, weighing risk versus reward. The hollow was tighter, harder for the mercenaries to follow, but offered no visibility. The plateau offered sightlines but exposure. He chose the hollow, trusting instinct over data, hoping the dense shadows would favor his form, not theirs. Behind him, a soft cracking echoed through the walls. He froze, heart steady, eyes scanning. One of the mercenaries had advanced farther than the others, moving with silent, deliberate precision, almost as if the jungle itself obeyed him. Elias felt the threat acutely. It was one thing to evade a group, another entirely to evade an individual trained to anticipate human reflexes. The mercenary was clever, relentless, and he had numbers behind him. Elias had nothing but his wits, his training, and the planet's unpredictable terrain. He set a small trap with the wire and shock unit he had salvaged earlier, attaching it to a jagged route that arched across the narrow path. He retreated into the shadows, holding his breath as the alien passed. There was a spark, a muffled cry, then silence. Elias allowed himself the smallest nod of satisfaction. One down, four to go. Still hopelessly outmatched but not hopeless yet. The hollow twisted, revealing a small subterranean pool reflecting the faint luminescence above. Elias knelt, drinking carefully, checking the water for signs of predators. Nothing moved, yet. He didn't underestimate silence. Not on this planet. Not in these circumstances. Every human instinct he had ever honed screamed for vigilance, for caution, for precision. Survival was no longer about running, it was about being both seen and unseen in exact measures. Above, the faint vibrations of the mercenaries' approach grew. Their tactics were subtle, coordinated, almost surgical. They moved in a pattern designed to funnel him, push him, trap him where escape would be impossible. Elias felt the pressure like a physical weight pressing against his chest. Every pathway became a question. Which would lead to freedom, which to death? The jungle offered choices but all carried risk. A sudden movement caught his eye, a shimmer in the shadows beyond the pool. Elias stiffened, sensing a presence not belonging to the mercenaries, not belonging to anything he had catalogued. Something large, ancient, and deliberate. The pulse of the jungle seemed to converge there, like the planet itself was focused on a single point. He forced himself to breathe slowly, matching the rhythm of the unseen observer, not out of submission but recognition. He was aware that whatever moved there could be predator or threat, but he also sensed judgment, intelligence, and purpose. The mercenary above, sensing hesitation, called out through the translator. Humans, step forward. Resistance is futile. Make this easier on yourself. The words were clinical, devoid of emotion, but they carried an unmistakable threat. Elias didn't respond. Words now were meaningless. Survival required action, timing, and a deeper understanding of the environment. He weighed his options, calculating how to keep the upper hand against a foe with superior numbers, weapons, and terrain knowledge. Suddenly, a low vibration ran along the ground. Elias felt it in his feet, his legs, his chest. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, then grew in intensity. The mercenary faltered, scanning nervously, unsure what he had sensed. Elias didn't flinch. He had learned early in life to listen to the world, to recognize patterns invisible to those who only relied on instruments and aggression. The pulse carried a message or perhaps a warning: do not proceed further. The hollow was not empty. Instinctively, Elias pressed himself against the wet rock, heart steady, eyes sharp. From the corner of his vision, movement, massive, deliberate, controlled. A shadow so large it could have swallowed the hollow in darkness, yet it moved with intent. Elias didn't panic. He recognized a predator's grace, not mindless fury. It was assessing him as much as he assessed it, and he waited, neither challenging nor fleeing, trusting that a pause in aggression could be the difference between life and death. The mercenary above, oblivious to the presence beside Elias, advanced, signaling the others to converge. Elias tensed, readying his limited defenses, aware that confrontation was unavoidable. The tension was absolute. Predator, human, and mercenary caught in a delicate balance where one wrong move would end the human's life. Yet within the stillness, Elias understood something essential. Survival on this planet required more than firepower. It required adaptation, intuition, and an almost instinctive bond with the forces that govern the environment. A soft rumble echoed from deeper in the hollow, almost a growl, almost the planet itself asserting dominance. The mercenary froze, scanning the shadows, his confidence waning. He had underestimated the territory, the human, and the unknown presence watching silently. Elias took advantage of the hesitation, stepping lightly along the edge of the pool, keeping his form obscured, staying within the shadow where the predator's attention might intersect with his own. The mercenary adjusted, unsure of what to do, signaling the others to hold position. Elias felt a rare shift. The hunters were now cautious, uncertain. Something larger, something ancient had reminded them that this hunt was no longer theirs to command. Elias, still crouched and alert, allowed himself a controlled exhale. The human alone could not have achieved this, but human intuition, resilience, and adaptability had created an opening, a pause in the mercenary's relentless pursuit. He moved deeper into the hollow, following the shadowed pulse that had revealed itself earlier, steps calculated, mind sharp. The predator had not attacked. It had chosen to observe. Elias knew instinctively that this would be the line he needed to hold, the leverage he would exploit to survive. Ahead, the hollow narrowed, forcing any pursuer into a bottleneck. He felt the jungle tighten around him, hostile yet protective, and he advanced with deliberate caution. For the first time since the chase began, Elias allowed himself a thought that had been buried beneath adrenaline and strategy. Maybe, just maybe, survival here was no longer a solo effort. He did not yet know the intentions of the presence watching him, but he understood that in this world, the balance of power was shifting. The mercenaries were cornering themselves as much as him, their confidence fraying in the face of forces they could neither see nor understand. And as he pressed forward, the hollow opening into a larger chamber where shadows pooled like ink, Elias knew that the next step would demand everything he had learned, every instinct honed, and every ounce of courage. The mercenaries would not hesitate. The predator, whatever it was, had made its choice to observe. The human had reached the point where all options converged, where survival depended on precision, understanding, and the still, quiet alliance forming between predator and prey. Elias braced himself, senses alert, heart steady. The jungle was alive, the mercenaries relentless, and the predator watching. The hunt was far from over, but for the first time the scales had begun to tilt. The next move would decide not just survival but the terms of the contest itself. Elias pressed himself against the damp rock wall, breathing shallow and precise, as the low vibrations in the hollow grew louder, resonating through the soles of his boots. Whatever moved in the shadows was deliberate, controlled, and impossibly large. He could feel the weight of its gaze without seeing it, a presence that measured him, evaluating whether he belonged in this place. Every instinct screamed caution, yet there was a strange equilibrium in the stillness, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Above, the mercenary team hesitated. Their leader signaled, uncertain, voice low but tense through the translator. "Advance carefully. Something is wrong." The words carried the first real hint of fear, though pride kept them moving. They believed in their technology, in their numbers, in their skill. They did not understand that on this planet, those things were secondary to understanding, patience, and respect for forces they could not command. Elias did not move immediately. Instead, he shifted his attention to the shadow beside him, feeling the pulse of it, the subtle press of muscle and sinew. The shape emerged gradually, massive and imposing. Eyes the color of molten amber glowed faintly, reflecting the bioluminescent light above. Its form was muscular, sleek, and terrifying in its perfection. This was not a predator in the sense of instinct alone. It carried an intelligence, a consideration that bordered on judgment. The mercenaries fired before they could think better of it. Bolts of energy lanced through the hollow, striking near the edges of the creature. It moved with a speed that seemed impossible, fluid as liquid, yet every motion purposeful. The first strike didn't even glance Elias, but the air around him trembled from the predator's reaction. In an instant, the mercenary who fired last was thrown backward, hitting the wall with a crack of shattered armor. The others froze, their formation fractured. Elias remained still, heart calm despite adrenaline surging through his veins. This was the moment where preparation met chance. He understood now that the creature's attention was on him, not out of aggression but recognition. He exhaled slowly, adjusting his stance, careful not to display fear, careful not to challenge. The predator was testing him, measuring his response, weighing intent. Human or threat? Ally or prey? It stepped closer, massive paws making no sound on the wet stone. Its head tilted, eyes locking with his. Elias felt the depth of its intelligence. It was aware, calculating, and yet there was a strange absence of hostility. In fact, he sensed something like acknowledgement, an understanding that survival required more than strength. In that instant, he realized that the predator did not operate on dominance. It operated on perception and choice. Above, the mercenaries regained some composure, weapons raised again. They had misjudged the rules of this world. Confidence turned to panic as the predator's gaze shifted briefly toward them. It did not roar, it did not charge. It simply moved with terrifying grace, a living wall between Elias and the hunters. The mercenaries hesitated, caught in that instant of recognition, unsure how to proceed against something far beyond their comprehension. Elias understood what he had to do. Every motion, every micro-expression, every hesitation would matter. He slowly lowered his hands, signaling no threat, showing awareness of the predator's power. He allowed a subtle display of respect, not submission but acknowledgement. The creature studied him, head cocked, muscles tensing in readiness, but no attack followed. It made a decision, a choice, and in that choice Elias saw his opportunity. One mercenary advanced again, attempting a calculated flank. The predator's response was instantaneous. It moved with liquid precision, intercepting the attacker before he could close the distance. One strike, and the mercenary was incapacitated, thrown against the wall with devastating force. Energy weapons discharged, the air crackling, but each attempt to fire again was met with a swift, measured counter. The predator was not mindless. It neutralized threats with efficiency, conserving its energy, making every move count. Elias watched, heart steady, eyes sharp, as the remaining mercenaries faltered. Their fear was visible now, even behind visors and armor. They had underestimated both the planet and its apex guardian. They had assumed technology and numbers could dictate outcomes. Elias had known from the start that calculation, patience, and the ability to read forces beyond immediate perception mattered more than firepower. In the hollow, silence returned, thick and heavy, punctuated only by shallow breaths and the subtle hum of the jungle. The predator lingered near Elias, massive form poised yet non-threatening. Its eyes never left him, maintaining a silent dialogue that required no words. Elias recognized a rare intelligence, a recognition of his presence as deliberate, cautious, and adaptable. The predator's choice was clear. He had passed the test, and in this strange alien calculus that meant something. Above, the mercenaries made a final attempt, desperation coloring their actions. The predator shifted, faster than thought, cutting off all escape, demonstrating control over the terrain that left the humans unable to advance. One by one, their attacks were countered with terrifying precision. They realized too late that survival here did not belong to those with weapons alone. Elias remained unharmed, unseen advantage merged with instinct, as the predator's presence dictated the terms. When the last mercenary fell into the shadows, defeated and terrified, Elias allowed himself a slow exhale. He had survived. He had not fought alone, yet this alliance had not been won by subjugation or command. It had been earned by presence, awareness, and a quiet understanding that survival required recognition of forces greater than oneself. The predator shifted its massive head toward him, eyes steady, unblinking. Elias mirrored the motion subtly, acknowledging the bond forming between them, a connection born not of ownership but of mutual respect. He felt a shift in the hollow, a subtle realignment of power. For the first time since the hunt had begun, he moved freely, the threat removed, not by weapons but by understanding, strategy, and the unspoken choice of a being far older, stronger, and wiser than any mercenary could comprehend. Elias knew this was only the beginning. The mercenaries were gone, but the implications stretched far beyond the hollow. The apex predator had chosen to act, and in doing so had altered the balance of the hunt, establishing a silent alliance with the human who had navigated both threat and intelligence with precision. Ahead lay unknown challenges, but Elias was no longer entirely alone. He could sense the predator's decision, and in that choice he recognized the first step toward survival. Not dominance, not conquest, but coexistence, and the promise that the next encounter would be guided by forces far greater than fear. The hollow seemed to exhale with him, shadows settling, energy pulsing in a rhythm that felt like recognition. Elias adjusted his stance, eyes forward, aware that the jungle, the predator, and the mercenaries had all tested him, and that he had passed the most crucial measure. Survival was no longer a gamble, it was a partnership forged in instinct and intelligence, and the next move in this deadly game would define not just his fate, but the first moment of understanding between human and apex predator. Elias crouched at the edge of the hollow, watching the shadows shift as the predator moved silently beside him, its massive form a living barrier against the remnants of the mercenary threat. The jungle seemed to exhale around them, the tension dissipating into a strange, watchful calm. For the first time in hours, he allowed himself to acknowledge the possibility of survival, though he knew better than to assume the planet had finished testing him. The predator's eyes flicked toward the treeline, then back to him, unblinking. Elias understood the message without words. Trust was tentative, provisional, earned through restraint and observation. He reached into his pack, pulling out a small ration bar and extended it cautiously. The creature's head tilted slightly, nostrils flaring as it assessed the offering. It did not snatch, did not strike. It simply observed, and in that observation, Elias felt the unspoken bond solidify. Survival had been negotiated without violence between them. Above, the remains of the mercenary team were scattered, unconscious or worse, evidence of the predator's efficiency and strategic intelligence. Elias scanned the perimeter, noting the broken equipment, scorched armor, and subtle indicators of the battle that had passed here. He made mental notes, understanding that any record of this encounter could have consequences far beyond the hollow. A human surviving an apex predator and outmaneuvering a trained mercenary squad would not remain secret for long. Hours passed as the planet's ambient glow shifted, the bioluminescent flora pulsating faintly, casting ethereal patterns across the hollow walls. Elias explored cautiously, keeping the predator within sight, noting its movements, its calculated watchfulness. There was intelligence here beyond instinct, a level of perception that humans could recognize and adapt to, but never dominate. He realized then that humans did not survive on planets like this through strength alone. They survived through understanding, through adaptation, and sometimes through the quiet establishment of alliances that transcended species. Communication with the outside world remained impossible. The extraction ship was still days away, delayed by electromagnetic interference that seemed to permeate the planet's upper atmosphere. Elias set up a temporary shelter, using natural formations and remnants of his own equipment. He worked with methodical care, aware that every movement was being noted by the predator. It did not intervene, but its presence was constant, a silent sentinel. In the quiet moments, he considered the broader implications of the encounter. If the galaxy were aware of a human capable of forging such a bond, reactions would range from fear to awe and perhaps envy. The predator shifted closer as night fell, the hollow bathed in dim, shifting light. Elias observed its behavior, noting subtle signs of recognition, the slight relaxation of muscles, the taper of its gaze, and the low hum of vibration through the earth that signaled contentment or assessment. He mirrored its calm, sitting cross-legged, breathing deliberately, projecting patience and respect. Here, survival depended on co-presence and measured observation, not aggression or dominance. When he finally allowed himself to eat, the predator remained still, watching, occasionally flicking its massive tail. Elias understood that he was witnessing intelligence in its purest form. Awareness of self, awareness of him, and a recognition of circumstance. The mercenaries had failed because they assumed superiority in numbers and technology. He had survived because he understood the predator's rules, and by extension the rules of this world. Days passed. Elias mapped the hollow, noting tunnels, exits, and vantage points. The predator followed silently, never straying far, an unspoken acknowledgement of their tenuous alliance. Occasionally he experimented, tossing small objects or offering water, each time observing the predator's response. It was deliberate, measured, and precise. In these interactions, Elias began to comprehend a fundamental truth. Apex predators did not choose companions out of fear or submission. They chose them based on perception, patience, and the demonstration of adaptability. The first sign of human reinforcements arrived in the form of distant lights, scanning devices, and low-frequency hums cutting through the electromagnetic interference. Elias signaled cautiously, aware that revealing his position prematurely could provoke disaster. The predator shifted its stance, moving closer, but did not obstruct him. It seemed to recognize that these humans were not threats, or at least not yet. Elias's heart quickened with relief, tempered by caution. Extraction did not guarantee safety, only a chance to leave the hollow alive. As the extraction team arrived, helmets and visors scanning the environment, Elias stepped forward, waving arms slowly to demonstrate non-aggression. The predator remained at the edge of the hollow, its massive eyes following every movement, assessing. The team paused, astonishment evident in their posture, and scanned data. They had been briefed on the dangers, on the mercenary threat, but they had not anticipated the apex predator, nor the human who had survived it. The commander approached cautiously, voice filtered through the translator. "Elias Ward, we've been tracking your distress signal. Are you intact?" The words carried relief, disbelief, and unspoken questions. Elias nodded, allowing himself a brief smile. He knew the story would travel fast. A human, alone on a death world, surviving trained mercenaries and an apex predator by forging a silent alliance. The extraction team retreated slowly, maintaining distance from the predator, whose presence dominated the hollow. Elias followed protocol, observing the creature, ensuring it remained undisturbed. When the last human had safely departed, he paused at the edge of the hollow, looking back. The predator had not moved closer, but it had not left either. Its gaze lingered, a quiet acknowledgement that the alliance was not one of control, but of respect and mutual understanding. Once aboard the transport, Elias initiated communications with the Galactic Command Network. The logs of the mercenaries, the sequence of the hunt, and the confirmation of the predator's intervention would not be ignored. The implications were immense. The galaxy would now reconsider the underestimated human species, recognizing an unexpected factor in survival, adaptability, and interaction with apex forces. As the planet receded beneath them, Elias allowed himself a moment of reflection. He had survived by understanding, by observing, and by recognizing that humans did not dominate predators. They earned their trust. Across the galaxy, the story would ripple, shifting perspectives on human capability. And somewhere in the hollow, the predator remained, a silent sentinel whose choice had altered the balance of power, and had demonstrated that even in the most hostile worlds, humans were not as alone as they appeared. Elias leaned against the hull of the transport, eyes tracing the fading landscape. The hollow and its guardian would remain, untamed and unclaimed, yet forever linked to the human who had navigated danger with intelligence and patience. The galaxy would take notice, and the first threads of a new understanding between species were already forming. Survival was no longer merely a matter of strength or weaponry, it was a testament to human adaptability, intuition, and the extraordinary ability to earn the respect of forces far beyond their own. Ahead lay new challenges, unknown worlds, and countless threats, but Elias knew one truth that would remain: the predator had chosen to act, and that choice had rewritten the rules. The galaxy would have to learn in time that when humans earned an alliance, even the apex forces of a planet could stand beside them. The hollow faded into the distance, but its lesson remained, a silent promise of resilience, understanding, and the subtle power of coexistence. Elias sat in the command chamber of the extraction ship, the hum of the engines vibrating through his chest. The predator's influence lingered in his mind, a constant reminder of the fragile alliance that had secured his survival. Galactic communications flickered across the screens, alerts pinging with curiosity, disbelief, and the faint tremor of fear. Word of his encounter had already begun to spread, and the council had called an immediate session to review the implications. Elias knew they would see it as a threat, a challenge to their authority, but he understood something they could not yet grasp. Survival was not about domination, it was about recognition, adaptation, and the subtle negotiation between species. The council representatives, their visors gleaming and voices crisp through translators, bombarded him with questions. "Explain how a single human evaded trained mercenaries on Zytherian 9, one demanded. Another leaned forward, clearly eager to record every detail. Elias met each gaze steadily, refusing to flinch under scrutiny. "I did not evade," he said evenly. "I observed." I calculated. I adapted. And I recognized forces that others assumed could be controlled. He paused, letting the words settle. The predator chose to act. It evaluated, understood, and made a decision that preserved my life. I did nothing extraordinary except respond to the environment intelligently. Some council members shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to consider the possibility that humans could inspire loyalty or recognition without fear. Elias pressed on, recounting the events precisely: the traps, the navigation of the hollow, the measured gestures toward the predator, and the mercenaries' miscalculations. He did not embellish. He let the facts speak. Humans, he emphasized, did not command apex forces. They earned acknowledgement through presence, calculation, and the ability to survive where others could not. As he spoke, he could feel the underlying tension in the chamber, a mix of incredulity and unease. The predator, though absent physically, haunted the narrative. Its choice had exposed the limitations of galactic arrogance, the assumption that advanced weaponry and numerical superiority guaranteed control. Elias allowed himself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The galaxy had underestimated humanity, and now they would begin to understand why humans were not merely resilient, they were exceptional in ways that could not be measured by standard metrics. The Council attempted to challenge him, citing protocol, risk, and the need to contain unpredictable species. Elias countered calmly, his voice unwavering. Containment fails when the subject itself chooses. Apex predators are not tools. They do not respond to orders or threats. They respond to recognition and adaptability. Any attempt to dominate them is irrelevant. Humans survive because we can navigate forces beyond immediate control. He let the statement hang, watching the reactions ripple across the room. Hours passed in debate, but Elias knew the truth: perception was shifting. The Council could not deny the evidence, nor could they ignore the recordings of mercenary logs, energy readings, and the detailed environmental scans. Across the galaxy, whispers were beginning to form, stories of a human who had not conquered a predator, but had earned its allegiance. It was a concept that terrified some and awed others. Elias understood that this moment would be remembered, not because he had killed or claimed, but because he had survived and earned respect in a universe that had assumed humans were expendable. Later, in the quiet of the observation deck, Elias accessed the live feed from Zytherian 9. The hollow glowed faintly under the planet's twin moons, and the predator lingered near the edge, massive and unbowed. Elias felt the subtle shift of pride and understanding. This was no longer a creature to fear, it was a partner in the silent negotiation of survival. He traced the contours of its form through the feed, noting the intelligence in its eyes, the patient calculation of every movement. Humanity had not conquered this world, but it had gained recognition, perhaps the most profound victory of all. A warning signal pinged unexpectedly, breaking the calm. Sensors indicated an incoming vessel, armed and clearly intending confrontation. The Council had not finished analyzing the threat of humans earning alliances across hostile planets, but Elias had already anticipated it. He moved swiftly, accessing tactical controls and preparing defensive protocols, his mind working through variables faster than any machine. This was a test not of firepower, but of presence, perception, and the ability to navigate threats intelligently. The vessel breached the atmosphere with calculated aggression, but Elias remained calm, aware that conventional tactics would fail against someone who understood adaptability. He sent a coded signal to the predator's territory, an acknowledgement of its position and the potential danger. Moments later, the predator appeared on the scanners, emerging from the shadows of the hollow, massive form moving with deliberate precision. The intruders faltered at the sight, unable to comprehend a force that combined human intelligence with apex strength. Elias maneuvered the extraction ship to a position that leveraged the predator's presence without exposing himself unnecessarily. The intruders attempted to fire, but the predator's calculated movements neutralized threats with devastating efficiency. Elias coordinated, but he knew this was no longer a contest of strategy alone. The predator operated on instinct, intelligence, and recognition, anticipating every maneuver. In that moment, Elias felt a surge of exhilaration and awe. Survival had become an art form, an interplay of human adaptability and apex instinct. By the time the intruders retreated, the galaxy would have begun to shift its perception of humanity. Elias sat back, breathing steady, eyes scanning the horizon. The predator's presence receded to the hollow, massive eyes watching but not leaving. He understood the lesson clearly: humans were not apex because of dominance or brute strength. Humans survived, endured, and sometimes thrived, because they could earn the acknowledgement of forces that others could neither predict nor command. As the ship departed, leaving Zytherian 9 behind, Elias allowed himself a final reflection. The predator had not been tamed. It had not been subdued. It had made a choice. And that choice, that recognition, had saved him, altered the balance of power, and proved that humanity's greatest strength lay not in weapons or numbers, but in resilience, intelligence, and the ability to navigate a universe that underestimated them. He looked out at the stars, the endless expanse of unknown worlds stretching ahead. Challenges awaited, threats beyond comprehension, but Elias knew one immutable truth. Wherever humanity went, they would be more than prey. They would be participants, negotiators, and sometimes allies in a galaxy that had assumed they were irrelevant. And somewhere on Zytherian 9 the predator waited, a silent sentinel, a reminder that the universe's deadliest forces could choose to stand beside a human, and that when they did, nothing would ever be the same. Elias exhaled, a slow, deliberate release of tension. The galaxy had witnessed a human endure, adapt, and survive in a crucible designed to destroy. And in that endurance, he understood the greatest truth of all. Recognition was power, and in the hands of humanity, it would redefine the rules of survival. The Predator's choice had written a new chapter, one where humans were no longer merely observers. They were forces to be reckoned with, capable of forging alliances that defied expectation, and surviving in a universe that had assumed they could not. The stars stretched ahead, vast and uncharted, and Elias knew that the hunt, the test, and the negotiation were only the beginning. But for the first time he smiled, confident that humanity had earned its place, not through conquest but through understanding, presence, and the rare, silent acknowledgement of the apex forces that watched and waited, deciding who would survive.